Welcome, everybody, to this week's edition of the Bison Video Blog with Jeff Kolpack from the Forum. I'm Izzo from WDAY Sports. North Dakota State back home. Final game before the bye week, game 10 already of this 2024 season as Northern Iowa comes calling. We'll get to the Panthers in just a moment. They're struggling at 2-6. It's been a rough road for Northern Iowa so far this season. Jeff, we got to see a host of new figures and names last week in the Bison big win over Murray State. I think that goes to show maybe more sort of the depth that this football team has built in 2024. There have been a ton of guys hurt, and the Bison haven't missed a beat so far.
100% agree. And again, just because these backups are second stringers or young doesn't mean they're not as good. They're just younger and maybe don't have the experience that these older guys have. I'll look at Enoch Sibamana. Here's a guy who was a junior. I think he'd have another year. He can make a hardship.
Correct.
So,
he could if he wanted to go down there.
So I think he'd have two more years after this. But Enoch from Fargo South is a guy, a backup linebacker, who took the place of injured Oscar Benson last week, starting for the first time against Murray. I would make the case he's every bit as talented as Oscar, if even more, maybe faster, too, than Oscar. So there's an area where production certainly did drop, had a pick six, and I think he's just been steadily getting better as the season progresses. It may be tough for Oscar to get his job back, frankly.
Yeah, well, you want competition, right? I mean, we don't know the status on Benson other than he was out. He was going to come back. As Politics says, he'll be back. We just don't know when. That's Sibamana's job right now. That Logan Kopp didn't play in the game either. He was held out, almost a precautionary reason, on Saturday against Murray State. So you've got another backup there. I mean, Marcus Scully played. I mean, he's played really well so far this season. Kubitz was back. Austin Altapeter played quite a bit because we know Nathaniel Staling is done for the season. The depth of the linebacker room has been tested, and we've seen it come through so far.
Give props to Grant Olson. He said before the season it's one of the deepest linebacking groups in FCS, and he's proven to be right, and that's without Staling.
Correct.
And that's without Kubitz for a week.
Look at Wirtz. He had his best game as a Bison against the Jacks.
Yeah, I don't know what was the 50-50 last week with Wirtz and Kubitz.
Yeah.
I really didn't pay that close attention to their rotation.
It was
they
pretty
played
close
a lot.
to what they did. But it was similar to what they did earlier on in the season. They just didn't need to. And after the game got to a certain point, Altapeter was in there playing linebacker.
And I think you're seeing the depth in the defensive line, too. I think you're seeing some guys. I just think Cody Heisman is playing at an all-conference level right now. And here's a guy who was a backup starting the season. I think he's just as good as any defensive lineman in the Missouri Valley.
Really good.
And worthy, I think, of first-team consideration. You look at Toby Anene, I think, has stepped in fine for the injured Dylan Hendricks. I think he looks every bit as part of a starter. And then you look at the back end, the defensive backs, which was a little, we'll say it was questionable after the Colorado game. I mean, they looked like they didn't know where they were. Some of those Shadir Sanders passes. That thing's really buttoned up, and that's without Sam Young now being done for the year. Jalen Crumby has stepped in his spot at strong safety.
Givens has been good. I think Darius Givens has been pretty good.
I said that at the beginning of the year. I said it was a Darius Givens season. And after 4 games, I'm going, I don't know about this. But since the Valley play started, he has looked every bit. Again, he's playing at some sort of all-conference level, in my opinion, first or second team or what have you. And so, and what if Cole Wisniewski comes back?
Give me a minute on that. Because you have contender for all-conference for Cody Heisman. How about contender for Marty Brown for the Jerry Rice Award? He was named the newcomer in the Missouri Valley again this week after a 3-touchdown performance against Murray State. He's 4th in the conference with 10 touchdowns. He leads all Division I freshmen in rushing yards. He's got that resume alone should be in the finalist.
That includes FBS, right?
Yes.
That includes FBS freshmen in rushing yards. I think he's a favorite, honestly, but then I'm sitting here in Fargo, North Dakota. There may be other guys out there, some freshmen playing on some teams who aren't that good or just racking up stats because nobody in front of them was any good. But I think Marty Brown is a Jerry Rice candidate for sure, if not, in my opinion, the favorite.
The way he's played, he's got 10 touchdowns on the season, mentioned the 3. He's had 2 separate games where he scored 3 touchdowns in a game, and we still haven't really seen him break one. I mean, maybe that touchdown, the first one against Murray State, if the end zone wasn't so close, he would have, but he hasn't really even got on the open field yet.
No, and then here's a guy, too. I look at his size, speed. He's mature. There's everything about Marty Brown. There's nothing I don't like about Marty Brown. I like the way he attacks the line of scrimmage when he gets the ball. again, the only thing missing from his resume is a 70-yarder.
Yes, that's there, and it may come this week. Northern Iowa's defense has been vulnerable. You mentioned Cole Wisniewski. We talked with Tim Polisic after the game on Saturday. I think the best way to summarize it, there's a chance that number 31 could be back out there after the surgery he had prior to the season. He's been steadily working out, I guess, running in the pool. He's had a little bit of swelling there with the ankle, but I think Polisic has opened the door that he could come back and play.
I don't think Tim would open the door if there wasn't a decent chance of him coming back on the field.
Right.
I don't think he would put out that false impression. And so with Cole Wisniewski, now I think the bye week's going to be the telltale. Yeah. Are you running during the bye week? And are you, can you put on the pads and make the cuts necessary that you need as a safety? I mean, he led the FCS in interceptions last year with 8. So this guy is a definite difference maker. And again, when he comes back, and Tim said it's not a matter of coming back conceptually or is it one
schematically.
Schematically, thank you. So that's not the factor. No. And I would say, are you in shape enough, I guess, to play?
Right, because this is a plug-and-play guy. He gets back, he's back, and you ride with that because you look what the Bison have left. Obviously, Northern Iowa this week, then the bye, then home from Missouri State, who suddenly played really well. The Bears have won 6 games in a row.
And the Bears are scary, by the way, because they have nothing else to play for.
Correct. That's their Super Bowls, the final 2 games of the season, the Bison or the Jackrabbits for Mo State, and then they end the season at South Dakota. If you get that guy back for the game in Vermillion, holy Christmas, that's quite the addition.
He's a veteran guy, and again, here's a guy like Enoch Sibamana has another year of eligibility. Now that's a whole nother
that's another conversation.
But if he comes back, I think would be a big shot for NDSU. And when you get in the playoffs, if the Bison continue, we think even if they stumble once, you're still a top 8 seed.
Yes.
So you'd have a week off from Thanksgiving.
Correct. You're not playing Thanksgiving, but if you lose twice, you're out of the top 4, probably consideration, I would think. But a lot can happen between then and now. You mentioned on Hot Mic on Monday, we went almost a half hour without talking about Northern Iowa, which is so unlike any year when we talk about the Panthers. And this year has been just a tough year. They won their first 2 games, but those were struggles with Valpo and St. Thomas. Since then, they've lost 6 games in a row. They're allowing over an average of 35 points per game. They've had one of the more tougher schedules in the country, Jeff, but this has been a tough year for Mark Farley's squad.
Well, they start off the 2 FBS games back-to-back on the road. You're going out to Hawaii. I know it's Hawaii, but it's still one mothership of a road trip. So at least they had a week off after that.
Yeah.
One thing about Northern Iowa, I just don't see the athletes on this team that I've seen before. I don't see the receivers, just the outside threats that they had. There's one guy who has a 60-yard long reception. Other than that, it's like 25 or 20. It's just you don't see the explosiveness on this team, and on defense too. I'm not seeing the defensive athletes we've seen in the past, So why is that? Is the budget or lack thereof finally catching up to Northern Iowa? Because according to the Knight Commission report, they are last in the Missouri Valley in funding football.
Yeah.
Now, you could report those figures, I guess, several ways.
You can contort the figures.
You can't take it to the, literally to the T.
Yeah.
But it's an indication, I think, that they are not up to speed in spending on football. And is it finally catching up to them?
Look at what they've allowed point-wise here. This is so unlike you and I. 36, 41, 42, 31, 49. That's unheard of for Bison fans that know they're going to play a tough, aggressive defense. They're going to get after the quarterback. This is anything but that, what they've done in Valley play so far this year.
Oh, just so uncharacteristic. Yeah. And maybe getting back to my point on where the funding. The word is Mark Farley has carried this program more than anybody would know, just being able to do more with less.
Yeah.
And maybe we didn't realize that how much more he was doing with how much less. In all those years, too.
Matt Scheckelman is their quarterback, sophomore from Appleton, Wisconsin. You saw he can move a bit. He's got some weapons. Ty Edwards, their running back. Sergio Moranci at wide receiver. They've got some guys that can make plays. I think Polisic will have NDSU ready simply because of the team that wears that other colored jersey. He knows Northern Iowa as well as anybody and what kind of talent level they usually bring in, that he's not going to let the Bison, especially before their bye week, take this one for granted.
Right. There was a time when Northern Iowa, I think, was a premier #1 rival for North Dakota State.
Yes.
Not UND, certainly, when UND was
And it
still
wasn't
in
the
D2
Jackrabbits.
and in the Big Sky. And it wasn't the Jackrabbits for a while there.
Nope.
It was Northern Iowa. It was Northern Iowa who Craig Bull wanted to emulate his team from. It was Northern Iowa at the press conference after a loss in Cedar Falls, 2008 or something like that, where he got up there and said, we need to look like those guys, and we don't look like those guys.
You look back, the game in 14 in Cedar Falls ended the 33-game win streak. The 2 games in 2015 were instant classics. From that stretch, from 2010 to 2015, if you were to ask, and we know quite a bit of those former players, who was the top rival, Northern Iowa would come back without any equivocation on
Usually
that.
the hardest hitting game,
Yeah.
the most physical game,
Absolutely.
the most intense game, and hands down during the season. It was Northern Iowa loud, the Fargo crowd.
loud.
The crowd knew it too.
Yep.
They hated him. I mean, the fans hated Northern Iowa. Do they still hate him?
Yeah, we're going to find out coming here on Saturday. We'll be with you for a full week of coverage, and then don't forget Bison Game Day. We'll get you started at 10 a.m. on
horse.
Saturday.
I'm sorry, no horse.
No
horse.
No
this
live
time.
animals? You're already telling us that?
Well, I got to do
Josh
some research.
Watson wants to get a live Panther on set for us. The game coming up at 2:20 with the game at 2:35. You can see it on WDAY between Northern Iowa and North Dakota State. For Jeff Kolpack, I'm Dom Izzo. That's this week's Bison Video Blog.